All right, well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our Trailblazer webinar today. My name is Cheryl O'Connor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Income Conductor, an award-winning retirement income planning technology that engages your clients in the planning process and provides them with a written plan that gives them the confidence and peace of mind they seek throughout their retirement. Our Trailblazer series highlights the people in our industry who are forging new paths and developing new ways to achieve success while providing great outcomes for clients. We welcome your questions, so please feel free to type them into the Q&A box at any time during the webinar, and we will address them at the end. Joining me is my co-host, Mark Butler, a consultant to wealth management and wealth tech firms and founder of Wealth Management GPT. Good afternoon, Mark.
Good afternoon, Cheryl. How you doing today?
Great, great. How are you?
Good, good. Looking forward to fall and everything it has to offer, including some cooler temperatures. How about you?
Yeah, it's getting really pretty around here with the leaves changing color, so I'm excited. It's my favorite season. So would you like to do the honors of introducing our Trailblazer guest?
I would. I'm more than honored. This guest is not only a trailblazer and a luminary, but is also someone that I've had the opportunity to get to know over the last couple of years. Let me just readjust my screen real quick. All right. Well, let me go through some written notes, and then I'll share some personal thoughts at the end. It's my pleasure to welcome our trailblazer today, Phil Lubinski. Phil is a nationally recognized expert, author, and thought leader in retirement income distribution, and has spent almost 50 years. I think I gave you credit for 50 this morning, Phil.
Thanks.
But who's counting? 37 of which as a financial planner. Phil was the first to develop a bucketing approach to distribution and has co-developed several fintech systems based on his time segment and strategy. As a nationally recognized expert in retirement income planning, Phil has authored or co-authored articles in the Journal of Financial Planning, the Wall Street Journal, Investment News, Forbes, the Retirement Income Journal, Kiplinger's, wealthmanagement.com, and Think Advisor, as well as being featured on the nightly business report on PBS. He is a sought-after speaker and podcast guest and has recorded a video series on his strategy that is part of the American College's RICP certification curriculum. Welcome, Phil. I'll just share a couple thoughts with the audience. I've had a chance to get to know Phil over the last couple of years, and he really is an industry legend in so many ways. I mean, his work has had a profound impact. I know he's going to talk a little bit about it, but it's had a profound impact in the industry, in the fintech space, as I said before, because he's been behind a few different solutions. But I would also say personally, Phil is one of the highest integrity people that I've met before, and also one of the nicest. So Phil, welcome. Oh, and lastly, before I forget, it's not here, but Phil is a Think Advisor luminary this year in the category of thought leadership. And so we're cheering him on to win, and look forward to having him bring home the hardware in Vegas in a few weeks. So welcome.
Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you. We had our first snow in Colorado in the mountains this weekend, so I fired up the fireplace back here to remind everybody that fall's here and winter's right around the corner.
Phil, maybe just take us back a little bit, where you started your career, how you got into this business at all, what really interested you in this business and serving clients, and obviously talking a little bit about the time segmented approach that you authored.
Yeah, actually, this I must admit, this is not the career I had envisioned, nor my parents. They wanted me to be a dentist. And so after 2 years of grueling through the pre-dental curriculum, it became apparent to to both me and most dental schools that that was not a career that I should pursue. And and I had to declare a major. And I was so tired of the hard sciences and math that I went 180 degrees in the other direction, and I declared psychology as my major, and got a degree in psychology with a focus on human behavior and child counseling. So with that, my first job out of college was actually had nothing to do with my degree, and I was education director for the American Cancer Society. And it was great working for a nonprofit, but nonprofit meant that you were pretty much a nonprofit too, based on how they paid. And so I was in search of a career that would allow us to start our family. And it just coincidentally was a time when we were planning our 10th high school reunion. And I was president of the senior class, and one of my friends was head of the reunion committee. And as we were conversing with each other, I asked him what he was doing. It sounded intriguing, and he started to recruit me into the financial planning business. And come to find out, what he was calling financial planning is that he worked in a life insurance agency. And I just kind of shuddered. I couldn't imagine after what my parents would say if I had said, after all that you spent on college, I'm going to be a life insurance salesman.
Oh, no.
No, it was, Dad just was not happy with that decision. But he said, come in and interview, talk to the group. Yeah, I think you'll find it very different. And he was exactly right. It was one of the most respected agencies here in Denver. They had this intensive 3-year training program that, after 3 years, and during that 3 years, you were pretty much restricted to just doing life and disability and annuity business. And the training was all around that. So I, had extensive knowledge in that product line. And it was all needs-based planning. So you were basically addressing the two questions: what if I die, or what if I become disabled? And during the end of that 3 years, I had the opportunity to do some presentations here in Denver at corporations where they were doing what they call pre-retirement planning seminars. And where insurance came into play was at that time, and the numbers have just reversed now, but about 85% of the residents who worked in Colorado had pension plans. And one of the big decisions in a pension plan was, do I take a reduced pension and provide for a survivor, or do I take the full pension? The third option was take the full pension and then buy a life insurance policy to take care of the survivors. And so that was a big part of the presentation of this multi-part series that they had. And that was my first kind of introduction to a group of people that were nearing retirement. And it was just a very exciting time. And it was a kind of a venue for me to really start building a clientele. So that was where I began.
Wow. So you were pretty young at the time, Phil. And, as we all know, the industry was really focused on save, accumulate, invest, grow your assets. What attracted you to the distribution phase that really not many people were paying attention to at that time?
Yeah, and nor was I. It happened quite by accident, but when I was in the CFP curriculum, there was a lady named Anita Van Caspel that was president of the College for Financial Planning. And that's kind of what recruited me to that credential, because she was asked at a public presentation who she thought were the best candidates for a CFP. And at that time, she said, I think insurance agents are, because they're needs-based planning. Mm-hmm. And, all they need to add to their, kind of risk questions is, not only what if I die or what if I become disabled, but what if I live? And here I am in front of a group of people that are close to that retirement age asking that question. But what happened that triggered the development of the strategy was one of the larger employers here in Denver was doing a early retirement incentive. And about 20 of my clients met their criteria to be offered that. and they're offered a pretty attractive bonus if they would just leave. But it was taking their pension much earlier, so there'd be a reduction in that. They weren't of Social Security age yet. So their big question to me was, can we take this? We'd love to retire, but we don't know if we have enough money. And the only financial planning software, I shouldn't say the only, but the most popular one then was Financial Profiles. And they had a retirement module. So for about half of those people that were my clients, I determined with that software that yes, they did have enough money to take it. And so they said, great, we're going to turn in the paperwork. And then they came back and said, so how do we turn this bonus money and our savings into income? And I said, gosh, I have no idea, because I hadn't thought through the through retirement part of the equation here. So I started going to a lot of different presentations, mostly by investment people, mostly by mutual fund companies. And throughout these presentations, they always had the kind of standard comparison of here's client A who put their money in the bank, here's client B who bought our mutual fund. They both took the same income. And at the end of 10 years, look how much better off client B was in spite of losses that they incurred during those 10-year periods. What I noticed, though, was that even though they all cited losses, they never showed a loss at the beginning of a 10-year period. They always showed it somewhere in the middle or at the end of the 10, which made me a little suspicious of why would so many unrelated people be hiding that one obvious scenario. So I got out my little Ibbotson yearbook and started looking for 10-year rolling periods of time that began with a loss, and just really about the time 10 years prior to this question coming up, there was one of those periods. And that was when I discovered the whole sequence of returns risk. And that if people start drawing income at the same time the markets are going down, they could drive that portfolio so deep that it probably has little or no chance to recover. And with my insurance background, then I thought, well, why wouldn't you use the guarantees that insurance companies offer, in the first part of retirement, and not use them for the entire retirement income plan? But the magic numbers seem to be in my research that if you held investments 10 years or longer, there was very low probability that you could lose any money. You certainly had different rates of return results, but investors' big fear is losing their money. So I thought, well, then why not create like a 2-segment plan and have 10 years of guarantees and 10 years of a market portfolio? And then I thought, well, if they're going to live 25 or 30 years, why just have an one portfolio for that second, half of their retirement? So I broke that second part into 3 more buckets and ended up with a 5-bucket plan that would basically cover a 25-year period of time. And I could tell retirees for the first 10 years, your income's going to be guaranteed and inflation proofed. And then for the rest of your life, we'll have money that's situated in market opportunities, so we don't need to worry about inflation. And we'll just one by one kind of work through those portfolios. It made incredible intuitive sense to the retirees. And that was really on what was then Lotus spreadsheets, because Excel hadn't been invented yet either, I don't think. I'm not even sure the calculators were out yet. But that was the genesis.
This was in the early 80s, right?
Yeah, but I was still using my abacus for calculations. But yeah, that was the genesis of the whole bucketing approach, and it caught on with retirees, not so much with advisors, but with retirees a lot.
Amazing. What a great story. I mean, fast forward to today, and as you know, there's no shortage of financial planning tools out in the marketplace. I'm sure if you look in some of the technology surveys in our space, there's probably upwards of 15, 20 different solutions out there that call themselves a financial planning solution. And most of them use a different methodology, as you know, systematic withdrawal, probabilities-based approach to distribution planning. Outside of the differences that strategy that you just talked about, what are some of the other benefits in the bucketing approach that you see that that you could share with the advisors, and in turn they could share with their clients?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advantages kind of stem from the overriding theme and kind of a redefinition as you transition from accumulating wealth to distributing wealth. So when we're accumulating wealth, we have this acronym ROI, which is return on investments. And all that's saying is that you chase the highest return consistent with the risk that you're willing to take to try to grow the pot of money as big as you can. On the distribution side, and I would tell clients this, we just need to redefine that ROI to be reliable ongoing income. And the only way to have reliable ongoing income is, in my opinion, is this whole segmented bucketing type of an approach. And that we do have a mix of guarantees and market opportunities into one portfolio, because you can't build one portfolio that's going to chase the highest returns and the highest reliability of income. They're kind of mutually exclusive. So you got to break it apart at the least by those two categories. Now, what that gave retirees was really the courage to go ahead and invest, because most of the retirees, they weren't worried about the markets long term. They're worried about the market short term. And that was the case 45 years ago and still the case today. And so by identifying kind of that 10-year marker and starting the segmentation there, it gave retirees the courage to do what you knew they needed to do. I mean, in order to offset inflation, you can't offset inflation with all fixed guaranteed products. So you got to have some growth in there. As soon as you put in growth, you bring in volatility and risk. But when you have that 10-year marker, the volatility doesn't go away, but the risk of loss of principal does. So at number one, it gave them the courage to invest, the confidence to invest with a portion of their money, and kind of the peace of mind of knowing that they weren't going to run out of money, and that no matter what the markets were doing on a day-to-day basis, they had no concerns because they were getting their paychecks on a monthly basis from a place where today's market conditions and tomorrow's and next month's had no income. So it gave them a peace of mind, and that's really what retirees are looking for, is permission to spend and the peace of mind of knowing they're not going to run out of money.
Well said.
So what other risks do you think advisors should be dealing with, and how does your strategy address those, Phil?
I mean, the big risk is behavior risk. So, once again, this is where the psychology came in, because people don't act rationally when markets are dropping, and particularly when they're dropping at the same time they're drawing income from them. So to be able to manage bad behavior with a strategy, because the key isn't so much to get somebody in the market. The key is to keep them in the market. And that's where people, hurt themselves, because they're jumping in and out of the market at the worst possible times. So this is a strategy that not only tells them to get in, but with exactly how much money to get in, and it keeps them in the markets during bad times. So like in 2008, when the markets dropped, I didn't have a single client bail out of the market. They weren't happy, and they had some portfolios that took some pretty serious hits, but they knew they didn't need those for 10, 15 years into the future, and it gave them the courage not to jump out, but to stick with it. So behavior risk, I think, is a huge risk that this strategy addresses.
Yeah, I remember meeting a Schwab advisor at a conference with all these certifications on his name tag, and this was in March 2009. And he said he would trade those all in for a degree in psychology. So, yeah, and you didn't mention this, but Money Management Institute actually did a study of the three major distribution strategies: systematic withdrawal, annuitization, and time segmentation. And they did say that time segmentation was superior at managing client behavior, and that is very important in retirement.
Yeah, and as much as the academics argue over what's the best retirement income, they all seem to come to the conclusion that segmentation does have that edge over other strategies. But other academic research that has happened, just in the last 10 years, Wade Pfau and Michael Kitces did a paper that they called the rising glide path. Very counterintuitive. It said that retirees needed to increase their risk as they age, not decrease their risk if they wanted to, offset inflation and mitigate longevity. Well, that's exactly what this strategy is. It's an asset allocation ladder that the money gets more aggressive as the client ages. So it was nice to see the model validated by that level of academic. Plus, Robert Merton wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review, I guess it was, called The Retirement Crisis. And he said that advisors should be they should manage a client's retirement income just like a pension fund manager. And they should only take the amount of risk required to meet the income goal. Well, that's exactly what this strategy is. That's exactly what I communicate to clients is that I'm not a big risk taker. I don't want to take risks we don't need to take. So I'm going to define how much we need to take. And if there's ever opportunities along the way to de-risk, then I'm going to do just like a pension fund manager. Well, retirees love that concept because they'd rather not take risk either. They just know that they haven't accumulated so much money that they, can afford to not take any risks. So the academics, fortunately for me, have validated stuff that I'd kind of done my own research on 40 plus years ago. And you're also fearful, you're always fearful of academic research blowing yours out of the water. But it didn't. It validated it all.
Yeah, that's great. So after 50 years, you have a lot of accumulated wisdom, Phil. Where do you think the industry is headed, and what would you like to see, as far as changes to make things better for advisors and clients?
Yeah, the industry, they talk retirement income, but it's kind of like, the same old pig with different lipstick. And the products, there's been some new products developed, but really the industry is still very transactional. The regulators are trying to make it more planning focused and with great resistance from the industry. But I mean, that's a direction that has to become more holistic. There are so many pieces that are dependent on each other, variables, and so many tough decisions that retirees have to make that they never dealt with. They've got to decide, when do they claim their Social Security? What Medicare plan do they sign up for? How do I change my investments to switch over from growing to delivering income? How long am I going to live? I mean, those were things they never had to think about, and they're very difficult things to work into one plan. So the industry has to come at a much more holistic approach and be much less transactional than it is. As well as the advisors got to change their value proposition, and they got to get away from money management being their value proposition, because it's just a matter of time before the bots and artificial intelligence are going to be able to manage money better and quicker and cheaper than any human can. And advisors are very fearful of that already. So, but by making your value proposition, not that you're a money manager, that you're a plan manager, you're going to manage their retirement income plan that incorporates all of those tough and confusing decisions. That's the value proposition. That's what sticks, clients to you, because they're not judging you anymore on, did you beat, their neighbor's portfolio? They're judging you on, did I get my check last month? Are you helping me with tough decisions? And am I getting, value way beyond the rates of return on the portfolios? And when I retired from my practice, and I got a bunch of, happy retirement cards for my clients, every card, number one, not a single card thanked me for all the tremendous analysis and management of standard deviations and alphas and betas that I brought to their table. All they thanked me for were primarily two things. Number one, of giving them permission to spend and enjoying their wealth. And number two, of bringing Brenda into my practice as my transition partner. That I thought enough about them, because they knew by the time I was retiring and still taking on some new clients that I wasn't going to be around for 25 or 30 more years. And they thought it just so nice of me to have a competent person that was going to continue the strategy and continue the relationship. And that's the other thing that advisors have got to do, is a much better job of their transition planning.
So do we have any questions, Mark?
We don't have any questions yet, but for our folks in the audience, if you have some questions, just click on the Q&A link at the bottom of the Zoom window and shoot away. We'd love to take a few.
Yeah, so we have some time. I'm always curious, asking people at the end of, towards the end of their career. You're not over yet, Phil. You still have a lot of work to do. But, if you could go back to those early days, are there any things you would do differently?
I know you always say that this work on Income Conductor is my capstone, and I think of it as my headstone. But thinking back, what would I have done differently? From a financial standpoint, I would have slapped a patent on bucketing. I certainly didn't think, as one individual in Denver, that I was developing anything that would grow into anything so important and popular that I needed to protect it. And now there's a million bucket strategies out there. They all do it a little bit differently, but I wish I could have got a piece of all the income that's being made off of bucketing out there. From a from an emotional standpoint, from a family standpoint, I wished we'd start our family earlier, because we'd started it late because I hated everybody else's kids, but I love mine. I wish I had 10 of them instead of 2 of them. And from a career standpoint, I can't imagine anything being more rewarding than this career, and just seeing people enjoy themselves in retirement and not worrying about it.
That's awesome. Hey, Phil, we got a couple of questions. I'm glad we prompted the audience. We'll do some quick ready, aim, fire on these. The first one from Kathy: what do you use for the safe investments?
So usually, if you have that 5 bucket plan, and let's say each one was 5 years long, then that first 10 years, the first 5, I would do a 5-year SPIA. The second 5 would be a 5-year MIGA that I would convert to a SPIA at the end of 5 years. And then the longer term buckets, like that 10-year bucket, was usually like a 50-50 portfolio. Then the next one would be a 60-40, and then an 80-20. And if there was needs for buckets beyond that, or for legacy, that 25 and beyond money could go into 100% equity portfolio. So that was kind of the product lineup and the investment strategy lineup.
Awesome. This is a really good question from Julian. How do you evaluate the withdrawal sequence from taxable and regular and Roth tax deferred accounts? And then the second part to that is, how do you think about this issue?
Yeah, because it's, there's some rules of thumb. And I actually have a webinar that I call Rules of Thumb Are Dumb. And one of the dumbest ones, I think, is that you always use non-qualified money first and qualified money second. You save the Roth till last. And what have been able to flush out with Income Conductor is that in many, many situations that's not the best liquidation order. And particularly when you're looking at longevity, I think the biggest mistake advisors make is running plans to both spouses living to the same age. I never, in the 107 death claims I filed in my life with my clients, never had a single case where both clients died at the same age. And JP Morgan just did a study that said only 7% of perfectly healthy 65-year-old couples, both of them lived age 95. And yet I see advisors constantly using the same age. When you bring longevity estimates in and there's going to be a survivor, and that survivor now still has a lot of qualified money but doesn't need as much income as the two of them did together, but they're filing as a single taxpayer, you suddenly see that non-qualified being used first blowing up in their face, because now it's all RMDs and qualified income coming at them, and their tax brackets have skyrocketed on them. So that's one of the analysis that we do right from the beginning, is that longevity analysis with couples, obviously, and to see are we setting up what we call the longevity gap tax trap. The other things that come into discussion or what you think about in liquidation order is just what is the ultimate end goal of this money. Some clients could care less about leaving an inheritance at the end. And so when you talked about Roth conversions, they said, I'm not going to pay taxes today just to give my kids, more tax-free, money at the end. We gave them all the money they deserved while we were raising them. So I don't care if we leave them anything at all. And if they get anything, even if it's taxable, they have more than they had before we died. But that comes into play. What are your legacy goals? So there's a lot of factors that determine, which asset classes, which tax statuses or combinations you use. And that's, retirees' top three questions are: number one, do I have enough? Number two, is it still in the right places? And then number three, what's the order of liquidation? And those are the questions that we try to address with Income Conductor.
Great. Couple last questions. From Patrick, has Phil published a book that details his segmentation process?
No, because Phil, they didn't diagnose it at the time because I don't think it existed. But Phil, I'm sure, has attention deficit. So yes, I've started a book 100 times, and it's a 10-chapter book. So I know what each of the 10 chapters are, and I've only finished one, and that's in 20 years of trying. So it's one of those things I'd love to do, but I'd have to hire a ghostwriter because I just don't have the patience to sit down and write for hours on end.
Yeah, that is a tough thing to do. And then lastly, from Joe, and Joe, maybe we'll have to follow up separately on this, but Joe said, how do I get a copy of the time segmentation study that Cheryl mentioned?
So we actually have copies of those articles that Phil mentioned, those white papers that talk about the Money Management Institute, the Kitces File white paper. So we can definitely get those to you, Joe, if you're interested in digging down deeper into those analyses.
We got some really good questions. It's probably the most questions we've gotten at once on the Trailblazer series. Phil, the only one we didn't get was, can I get Phil's autograph? Maybe since people are interested in your thought leadership, maybe just share the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you or read about things that you're talking about.
Well, my email address is plubinski, Lubinski, at wealthconductor.com. So that's probably the best. I mean, you can Google me and some good things come up, but I think I've managed to get the bad stuff off the web. But that would probably be the two easiest ways to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, those are the questions that we had. Thanks, Phil, for going through those.
Oh, thank you. This was fun.
So we're past the half hour, Phil, and we could probably talk to you for a few more hours, but we want to be respectful of our attendees' time. And I just want to thank you personally and professionally for everything you have done for the industry. I'm sure when you look in the mirror and you think about your clients and all the clients who are having happy, relaxed, retirements, feeling financially secure, you must feel pretty good.
You do. It's that, who was it? The hierarchy of needs, Maslow, and the top tier was that self-actualization, and that's really what this career can give an advisor. Yeah. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being our guest. Thank you, Mark. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. Join us for our next Trailblazer, which will be in November. See you then.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.